G'day, Ziggy here, CEO of 3P and author of Money Does Grow on Trees. Welcome to the episode. This is Plan to Prosper. And as you know, on this podcast, we talk all things prospering, in particular wealth. And gee, we're going to have a lot of different topics come up when it comes to where that source of wealth is. What does wealth actually mean? So we have been talking lately about a variety of things in financial planning and obviously property and legal, because you've got to protect your wealth, right? And so what we're doing today, there seems to be this theme around sort of business, and for many people that are in business, that is their source of wealth or their source of income. Because what we do naturally is wherever our income comes from, we look at investing that and getting a return on that capital. So it's either property or shares typically. And if you're an employee, then the income that you're receiving is controlled by the employer. So that's, for a lot of people, that's where the income comes from, and therefore the planning is done purely at a personal level. For a lot of people that are in business, the income comes from business, right? And that source, that well, needs to be restored. It needs to grow, and to make sure that business, you can leverage off the business and actually continue to grow that and even increase that income. So we've got a few guests coming up. We're going to talk about stuff like, the difference between generating income to making income, making money, making wealth, generating wealth, but also intellectual property. But today I'm excited because what we are going to talk about is some ideologies, philosophies, sure. David, we're talking about. So we've got David Balestri. David Balestri is an executive coach. He works with CEOs and entrepreneurs around the world, which is pretty cool. So hopefully he'll tell us a couple of examples of some of the big businesses that big CEOs that have been working with over the world. And so he's an author of 10 books, 10 books, right, which is pretty cool. I've got one.
Come on. Pick up your game.
Nine to go. And so he's worked with many businesses and entrepreneurs, and he's a forward thinker. I love chatting to him. He's a forward thinker, and it comes to this whole wealth space. And we want to talk today. We want to ultimately talk about a range of things, but ultimately get to the point where we're talking about what does a purpose-driven business looks like, right? When you're in business, typically we want business to be for good. What does that mean? What does it look like? So, David Balestri, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Ziggy. Great to be on, and looking forward to the chat.
Great to have you. Now, you come from the Central Coast, right? And we were talking about sort of the footy earlier, and then we said, "Yeah, hey, David, do you know the AFL?" And you go, "What, AFL?"
Yeah. No, man, I'm from north of the border. We play the real footy.
The real footy, that's right.
Yeah.
The tough stuff.
The tough stuff.
The Tina Turner stuff.
Yeah. That's right. We had her on.
Matey, good to have you. So just tell us a bit more about what you do.
Yeah. Look, I like you said, I'm a coach to entrepreneurs and CEOs of companies, and it really started. I'm a kidpreneur. Been in business since I was 10 years old. It was my own business. My first business was my own business, and then at 11. I got into the family business, so I'm an ethnic background, so we're in food.
Now we're just going to need to clarify, because people that are going to hear the word Balestri,
right.
I immediately thought Italian.
Italian, right?
Yeah.
Which it is an Italian last name. That's from my father's side through the grandparents, but I'm actually an Argentine, so I was born in Argentina. I'm fully imported, but came when I was very young. So I'm Argentine born, but Australian bred. So I'm an Aussie until the World Cup, the soccer, the football World Cup comes on.
Messi.
And then I become a patriot because Australia doesn't have Messi in their team. So that's the mix. So South American,
okay,
which is great. But just in early into business, right through the teenage years, and got a concept. Thought I knew what wealth was about. As much as a 14, 15-year-old, I could see, I was back in the days where my dad was the typical fish and chip shop owner, right? So everything that you think about that.
Now, he would have been one amongst many Greek fish and chip shop owners, right? Because most were Greek.
The Greeks brought him in. It was like the mafia. The Greeks brought him into it, and they taught him everything they knew, good and bad.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying, like good and bad. So we were in pizza businesses and takeaway, so food industries. And so that's where I cut my teeth. But then in my 20s, I got into sales. My wife, I got married. My wife and I, we got into other industries. She was in the pet grooming industry, and in Australia, it's not like we're not talking about trailers on the back of cars like it was. This was shops. This was high-end kind of boutiques, and so it was quite lucrative. And we built a network of those. But I blew up a business in the sense to the wall. I hit the wall at 28. And took a bit of an ego hit and went to corporate life for about 8 years. And I think it was in that time that corporate life really began to ask the questions about what is life about? What is business really about? Is it about the chasing of the money? Like is it ultimately that? Or is it something greater? And I returned to my own businesses at this consultancy when I was 36. And I feel like I returned with a broadened perspective. And I have to say that the first, almost 20 years of business was exciting, but not very satisfying. These last almost 20 years has been totally opposite to that.
Awesome.
I just feel like I cracked a code around true wealth, true wealth, yeah.
Really love to get to that point. And I do want to also come back to what you learnt from blowing up the business. But before we do that, you got to tell us the story about working for your dad and then playing off your dad against the Greek fish and chip shop owners. This is gold.
It's classic. So my father, at 11, I became the waiter at his pizza restaurant. It was open in the evening. So after school, I'd go straight. I wouldn't go home. Go straight to the shop, and I'd work every night as the waiter. And I was a young guy. My dad, it was amazing, and get a pizza every night for dinner. I was like in heaven, But after 3 months eating pizza every night, that kind of got old, and I realised, I sort of woke up. I thought my pockets are a bit light. Dad's not giving me any cash, not even pocket money. So there was 2 doors down. There was some Greek family working fish and chip shop, of course, and I made friends with them and. They, just made myself useful, when I wasn't with Dad, and I said to them, hey, I could work for you guys, maybe, and they said, oh, that'd be amazing. I said, what would you pay me now? I'm an old man, so the metrics are going to figure out here. But they said, we'll pay you $1 an hour, which again back then would have been, I don't know, maybe $10 an hour today, right? Yeah. And I didn't really have the intention of going and working for them. I just needed some leverage because Dad wasn't coming around. He pulled the old, I feed you, I clothe you, I put it, And so I went to my dad thinking, we're going to have a negotiation here. And I said to him, Dad, you wouldn't believe it, but the Greeks, they've offered me a job for $1 an hour. And I told them that I had to speak to you first, but I just said to him, if you'll match it. Like back then, I wasn't. I should have read Donald Trump's Art of the Deal. I said, if you beat it, but I said, if you match it, I'll stay here. And he said no.
No.
He said no. I think he thought I was bluffing or lying.
Yeah.
And so I quit at 11. I quit. I said, that's it. I'm not working for you. And I started going working for the Greeks. And that lasted about 12 months. And then I noticed a Lebanese family down the road, similar business, the Greeks. And I made friends with that guy.
And a bit of a pattern here.
Yeah, we entered into negotiations, and he doubled the dollar. So it was $2 an hour. He said, "I'll pay you double, but you got to quit today." So I went to the Greeks. I'd had enough anyway. I said to him, "Hey, I'm done. I'm going to work for the Lebanese guy down the road." So I worked for the Lebanese guy, and then about 14 years old, my dad came to me and he said, "I'm ready to buy the Greeks out, but I don't know how to run their shop. You know how to run it."
Yeah.
And so he said, "I'll make you a deal. I'll let you leave school if you become a business partner."
Wow.
And so I did at 14.
Wow. What was the discussion around the dinner table that night?
Look, Dad was, it was a bit quiet. It was a bit awkward. But Dad got over it really quick. I think his pride, just stopped him from saying, "Hey, come on, look, let me." Know, it's he dug his heels in. I dug my heels in. Yeah. It was all right. Mum smoothed it all out.
Of course,
with food,
as mums always do.
Yeah.
So entrepreneur at heart from when you were young, into business, and then the business that you blew up. Tell me about that, because not so much, I guess, the event unless you want to, but what you learnt from it, because it's important. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to make mistakes. It doesn't matter. In one sense, it doesn't matter what the mistake is. Yeah. It's what you learn from it.
Yeah, I think now when I coach and train people, one of the first things I always talk about is it doesn't matter how talented you are, how strong you are, how much industry knowledge you have, or even how good your business is. No matter, you are the bottleneck. You will always be the bottleneck. And so the thought that you would work, I always say the definition of success is working twice as much on your personal development as you do the business, not to neglect the business. But some people are just so busy working sales, marketing, and no personal development. And if you do that, what might happen is your business will grow bigger than you. And the moment that happens, you're very vulnerable. And that's really what happened to me. I had a string of successes, but I hadn't really committed to evolving, not just as a business person, but I want to say as a human being. I was 28 years old. I had a lot of ego. There was a lot of that the humility wasn't there. And so you know what you do? What do you do? Well, you begin to operate. You leave wisdom and you operate out of ego. And I just made a whole bunch of dumb calls. Didn't have the right people around me. I wasn't asking for people's opinions. I was just charging because I had this track record. I'm the kidpreneur, right?
Yeah.
And most of the businesses had done really well before that. And so looking back now, I'm like, the brick wall was really obvious and the calls were really dumb. And if I would have taken a bit more time and maybe asked for some perspective, I wouldn't have hit that. But I got to tell you, that business failure was the best thing. It was what I needed. Somehow I needed that to be checked. And I would say, I said to people, I don't know, I think I burnt maybe $250,000. This is like 20-something years ago, right? Best $250,000 overspent. In retrospect of the man I then became after that, the check of the ego and the last 20, 25 years have been very different.
Yeah.
So painful to go through, but worth every painful moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tell me about, because you work with a lot of different CEOs
Yeah.
and businesses, different industries, people all over the world. So that's
Yeah.
very diverse. What are some of the common traits you see in in these CEOs, these business owners?
Yeah, we the thing that makes you a great entrepreneur usually is that you're a great problem solver. And you're able to move pretty quickly. It's a great thought, but it's also a great challenge because most business people don't raise a team around them quick enough. And so what they're doing is they, as their business grows, they get busier. And I always say that a signal that you're doing it wrong is that if your business is getting bigger and you're getting busier, you're building it the wrong way. It's actually supposed to work the other way. The bigger your business gets, the less busy you should be. When I mean less busy, I mean less busy touching things that are not in your sweet spot.
I heard someone once say that if my aim is to make myself redundant in my job, and your job being the day-to-day stuff.
I got a practical way when I usually try and bring perspective. I usually say get your calculator out, okay, and I say, write the total turnover of your company. So total turnover of your company. And I go, divide that by 48. So let's say 48 weeks. And then divide that by, let's say you're doing 60 hours. And, what's that number? And so let's say whatever the number's $1,500 or $3,000. And I say, as the CEO, that is what you are worth, your hourly rate to this company. So if it's $3,000 and you're mucking around with your emails, right? Instead of hiring a PA and paying them whatever's relevant, whatever the hourly rate, $40, $50, even $100.
Or watching YouTube videos.
Or watching, right. Understand, you've misunderstood your value. And so you should be touching nothing that isn't worth whatever that number is, 1,500, 3,000, 5,000, you shouldn't be touching any of that. And so anytime you're touching anything that somebody else could do, you're in this challenge. And most business people work too hard on the wrong thing. I'm for working hard. They just touch the wrong thing, right? So it's the Pareto, right? 80% of the stuff you touch is not going to move the needle on your business, and only 20% of it is. The magic is figuring out what is that 20%. And the long road is to try and figure it out by yourself. And here's the shameless plug. That's why you need a coach.
Yeah.
That's why you need.
We got there.
Well,
We got there.
You need a coach or a
Yeah.
consultant. You need someone that is standing outside of the whirlwind of the day-to-day pressure and the pulls and all of that, and is standing outside of the emotional energy, and can be a sounding board to you, can bring perspective that you lose in the whirlwind of it. And so I see a lot of exhausted business people, and it's nice to jump into a nice car and go to a nice home, but if you're exhausted, it takes the shine off all
Yeah.
of that, to be honest, and then give your not your best to your family, to your friends, to the stuff that really matters. That's just you go on a holiday and you're sleeping.
Yeah. Oh, checking your emails.
Checking your emails, yeah.
There's this lie, I think, that and this has been something that I've had to sort of transition from, process, all that sort of thing.
Right.
That is, I'll get it bigger, I'll get it up to a point, then I'll be free. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, what happens is business, enterprise, even your own life, you got to see it as a child that you get to raise and nurture. And so it'd be like, well, I'll feed the kid candy and ice cream until they're 18 and they're an adult, and then I'll make sure they eat their veggies. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You've created a beast, and so what happens is by just going, look, I'll just put my head down, bum up, and go hell for leather. There's a half truth to that. To launch anything, there's a breakthrough pressure that is required in most businesses. So there is a season where you would go, hey, I'm going to pull out extraordinary stops. I know what it is to do 18-hour days. I know what it is to string them along. The reality is that at best is a 3 to 6 month reality. But if you're 4 or 5 years into your business and you're still working like that, you have a major problem, because the ability to not only transition the business and it survives, you can't do that, because psychologically you will be almost addicted to the grind. You become addicted to it. And I remember, practical example, a developer came to me. He said to me, Dave, you need to help me. I think you need to be my business coach. I said, what's up? He said, I'm working 5 days a week, 12 hours a day. This business is just, there's stuff happening all the time. And he says, I'm exhausted, but I don't think I'm making the money that I should be making. I got to know what to do. And I said to the guy, right, so, because it was a building industry, so they don't work Saturday, Sunday. And I said to him, mate, you need to take Fridays off. And he laughed. He said, no, you didn't hear what I just said. He repeated himself. I said, yeah, you need to take Fridays off. He laughed and walked out. I think he paid for the coffee, but he walked out. He's like, oh, well, you're obviously not the coach for me, because you don't know what you're talking about. Calls me 6 months later. He goes, Dave, I'm desperate. Like, come on, man. Like, it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
It's gotten worse. He goes, I'm at my wit's end. The missus, she's not happy. I said to him, hey, have you taken Fridays off yet? He hung up. He hung up the phone because he thought, I didn't care.
There's got to be something more.
Well, it's ridiculous because he's like, it's so hectic, and I'm working my tail off, and I'm not in front. And so he thought the only answer was I got to somehow work 14 hours a day or 15 hours a day. Anyway, 12 months later, he calls me, and he was much calmer. And he says, I got to say, out of desperation, he goes, I tried everything else. I did what you said. He said, I started taking Fridays off, switched the phone off. He said, I took a notepad and a pen. We live by the water, central. So he was like, I went to the beach, and he said, instead of working on Fridays, I started thinking about the business on Fridays. And he said, all of a sudden, he said, there was an opportunity to get clarity, because I stepped out of the whirlwind, and all of a sudden, he said, I got a plan. And I began to realize where I'm wasting time, money, where I'm touching stuff that I shouldn't be touching. He said, I hear what you're saying now. You were telling me you're working too hard in the business and not at all on the business. So It was counterintuitive. And that's what happens when you build the business around you, that you've got to touch everything. Look, a lot of entrepreneurs and business people, respectfully, they're control freaks.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's what I was going to get to.
Right.
So that's an example of someone who had to learn it the hard way and learn it themselves.
Yeah.
Have you worked with people who have just? I guess there would be a mix of people, right?
Yeah,
So there'd be the type of person who goes, David, whatever you say, I'm just going to do, and they
Yes.
do it. And ideally, that's the type.
Yeah, dream.
Yeah, dream.
Dream.
But there would be the ones that would be kicking and screaming, but they come with you along the journey.
Yeah. I try and say to people, because it's too much pressure. Like I always say to people, I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's not my role as a coach. As a coach, I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to listen to what you're not saying, like try and pick up on things that, like, on some of the mindset stuff. And I said, really, my job isn't to tell you what to do. I fundamentally believe that everybody carries brilliance inside of them, and they're more than adequate to do the thing that they need to do. That most people just need a little bit of help because we get stuck in some of our thinking. And so I never put the pressure on me. I'm like, I'm not going to tell you to buy, sell, this and that. That's not what a coach does. What a coach does is we just look at the 2%ers. We look at the flow, your voice, the way you're talking, the stuff you're not saying. And the idea is just to chip away. Hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And I find that when that happens, people migrate. I've never met anyone that went from, a 1 disaster to a 10 killing it in a couple of steps.
Yeah.
It's unsustainable. Change does not happen that way. Success doesn't happen that way. You learn how to win the day. When you learn how to win your day, you string enough days, you'll win your week. If you learn how to win your week, you string enough weeks, you'll win a month. You win a month, you learn how to do that, string enough months, you win the year. You know what I mean? Like that is how incremental growth happens. And it's the only growth that is sustainable is incremental, because that's why in some respects I'm not a guru, I'm a coach. I got a lot of wisdom, hopefully, some things that make sense. Some people have done probably the opposite of what I might have suggested as an option. I always say to people, listen, I'll give you an option. Like if you say, give me an idea, I'll give you an idea. I'm not precious about the idea. You don't like that one? I got another one.
Yeah.
My ego, that's the thing that helped me at 28. Yes. My ego is not tied up in the thing that I do.
Yep.
I'm secure in myself as a human being. I don't have to get it right 100% of the time. I don't. Richard Branson, right? Virgin, right?
Yeah.
He said when he first started out, he would get 3 out of 10 decisions right. He said the only thing that kept him afloat was the 3 that he got right compensated for the 7 that he got wrong, right? And then they said to him, well, what about now? You've been in business a long time, da-da-da. He says, I reckon I get 6 out of 10 right today. It's just the 6 that I get absolutely eclipse the 4 that I don't.
I was listening to an interview with Elon Musk,
right,
and he was talking about SpaceX. And when they asked him about it, because he brought back those American astronauts, and when they asked him about it, he had to go with setting up the company, and he says the first 3 times we tried to send up the rocket, we failed.
Yeah,
and we were on the brink of shutting down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he said the 4th one worked.
We got it.
And then it changed. 3 failures.
I was going to say, right? That's why you've got to remove, you've got to go and get healthy in your ego, in your personal development. You've got to separate that. You've got to separate it from your money, because you'll make bad decisions, right? You got to separate it from your business. You'll make bad. You got to separate your ego from even some of the friends that you the relationships that you engage with, which is difficult. So you go, well, how do you separate it? Well, it's like not everything is a personal attack. Like if you have to get everything perfect, it's a denial of the human experience.
Yeah.
It's too much pressure.
Yeah.
Who wants to be perfect? I don't want to be perfect. I just want to be consistent, and I want to grow. And if I make a dumb decision, I want to make a smarter decision next time. Yeah.
I want to pick up on something you said, because you mentioned when you were talking about your clients or people in general, you mentioned that there is some brilliant in everyone.
Yeah, brilliance in everyone.
Brilliance in everyone. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think, I'm prejudiced. I believe that every human being carries inside of them what I would call a fingerprint of God. There's just this human beings. We're very different. That's why I laugh when people suggest they come from apes. I'm like, well, that's good for you, buddy. But actually, no, we're brilliant people, and people in general in the right environment of relationships, in the right environments of health, in the right environments, actually do really well. And everyone carries brilliance. It's just that the brilliance is different, and I believe it's assigned. I have a sense that everyone carries some version of destiny, whatever that might be. And as you come into alignment with that, which, I have a whole scenario where we take people through their values, their passions, their personalities. Like I always say, you're wired for your destiny. And so it shouldn't be a mystery to you. I always say, look, my destiny is not to be the winner of The Voice, right? Because I can't say...
The Voice is good.
Well, the early days of the Australian Idol, the reason that was funny is because they used to let people audition that absolutely had no right to be auditioning because it made good television.
Yeah.
But most of those people fundamentally believed that they were brilliant. The girls thought they were the next Britney Spears.
Yeah,
or
they'd
whatever.
get upset.
Right, and then get upset when the judges dicko would usually give it hard to them. And then their world, and it's like this illusion. I find that people don't do well when they live illusioned, and usually illusionary thinking comes from comparison. They think that, and we live in an era of influencers, so all of a sudden you want to be the next this or that. But the problem is, while you're trying to be the next this or that, you don't do the work to figure out who am I. And you go, well, what's that got to do with business? A lot. A lot. You are the bottleneck to your business, size-wise, but not even just size-wise, what your business becomes. Some businesses are just toxic, and the reason they're toxic is because they're a reflection of the owner. Because right, leadership, we set culture, and people flourish under that, or they're diminished under that. A healthy CEO, healthy entrepreneur is going to create an amazing environment in which staff and other people, clients, customers, suppliers, just love to be around, that flourish under it. And you know what? Money's attracted to that.
Yep.
Influence and impact is attracted to that. Some people chase the money. They think if we could just get the technicality right. If you have the right technical dimensions in your business, but it's toxic, you'll burn your money. Like you'll burn it, right? Like
Yeah.
So
tell us more about. I mean, you mentioned culture.
Yeah.
And there's if we talk about previous generations in terms of their work ethic. There are a lot that got to where they are now because they hustled.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They hustled. They did whatever they needed to do.
Yeah.
They worked all the odd hours.
Yeah.
They did. So there was a lot of, there may have been not as much smarts, entrepreneurial,
Right.
but they just hustled. And I think there's probably a bit where that is lacking these days because we want to go straight to being the influencer without the hustling. But the other side to that is you can just hustle your whole life, and it's a hard slog.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I when people say, well, if you want to be successful, just work hard. I disagree. I think hard work could and should be a part of the answer. It's not the only answer. So my father's generation would have been, success is equated to how many hours you work or how hard you work in the thing that you're doing. But we don't live in the world where people are cracking rocks anymore, all right? As a matter of fact, AI technology is changing things dramatically. Even the notion of, I coach people in Europe, a tech company in Europe. They don't have full-time or even part-time employees. They have gig employees. So they have a project and they onboard people with gigs, programmers, into that project, but those programmers are also gigging for other companies, right? And so they're not paying them for time in the seat or in front of the computer, they're paying them for outcomes. That fundamentally changes even the nature of work and how we understand it. So the notion that says, oh, just work hard and you'll be... I know a lot of people that worked hard that actually didn't get ahead, that haven't really moved forward, that I wouldn't want their life for anything. also too, you think about the majority of people coming into our businesses, into the marketplace are, okay, my generation is Gen X, mine and yours. Then you got the millennials, right? They're a very different generation from the boomers.
Yeah.
And so I do think there are some things that need to trickle down. There's a sense of consistency, a sense of building value over time, a sense of sticking with things even when they get hard. Like some of those things you'll have to somehow translate in a way that's not antagonistic, right? You can't. The thought of setting up policies that are from a previous era are really irrelevant, right? I like the thought of, I've been talking a lot about beautiful companies, this thought of, well, what's a beautiful company? I think that technology and efficiencies, it's hard to find the competitive edge with your competitor. They're using the same AI that you're using, the same tech that we're like, the margins are very tight. Everything is super efficient. The biggest difference between one business to another or one workplace to another is workplace culture. How staff are treated, how they treat one another, what's tolerated, what's championed. That is the biggest area of differentiation. So some companies will, all of a sudden think, well, we just got to pay people more, right? Now, I think you need to pay people fairly and generously, and there's that is part of a culture as well. If you have a workplace culture where you scrimp on the staff, you can see there's not a toleration for scrimping on the staff, and then the CEO goes and gets his $5 million bonus. That's not hugely palatable, though there is, I'm not saying the CEO shouldn't be rewarded greater. He takes the greater risk or she takes the greater risk. But I think that there's just human capital, and which I hate saying it that way because it makes it feel the people dynamics is going to be, for most businesses, the make or break, or the edge over the other.
Yep. I'm enjoying our chat, and I can see this. I knew where it was going to go. It was going to go over 2 episodes, right? Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode with David Balestri. We covered and unpacked so many things. We have to go further, and we've got an episode 2. So that's the next one, where we're going to cover all things around spirituality in terms of business and aligning your purpose to the business and the creation of wealth. So thanks for joining. As always, you can connect with us on all social media.